Welcome back, everybody. This is Eric here with Iraq Veteran 8888. Today, I've got another firearms fact episode for you, and we're going to be talking about the most mass-produced rifle of World War II. I'm sure some of you know what that rifle is, and we're talking about the M90-130 Mosin Nagant chambered in 7.62 by 54 rimmed. And we're going to talk about this rifle a bit because it made a huge impact on the war, and we're going to talk about why, because production numbers matter. And we are going to discuss loosely some production numbers and also some of the features about this rifle that made it so popular and so bomb-proof for the Russians in World War II. Before we get started, I would like to thank our friends at Otis Technologies for supporting today's video. Anything you need in the realm of cleaning your guns, they have everything you could ever want. Any of you that served in the military, you know that Otis makes those awesome pull-through cleaning systems in the little black pouch. That's what they're known for, but they have a ton of other useful tools, cleaning rods through Shooter's Choice, tons of different solvents, oils, cleaning compounds, lubricants, everything to keep your firearm running nice and clean and keep your gun nice and serviceable for you. Check out the link below. You can find all the Otis goodies you want there, and tell them that Eric sent you, and a big thanks to them for being a long-term supporter of the channel. All right, so the 9130, right? So around the turn of the century, around 1891 or so, is when they developed the first long versions of these rifles, and they had much longer barrels, okay? And the early Mosins were made by the French, okay? And look, these guns have undergone a lot of changes over the years, and around the 30s, the Russians realized that they needed to take their 91, the 1891 service rifle, and do a little bit of modernization. So they shortened the barrel, which I don't know if you can call a 29-inch barrel shorter, but yes, these guns are considerably shorter than their M91 counterparts. They wanted to have a standardized M91 service rifle with all the features that they wanted. They added updated sights. They added an updated globe front sight, right? The stocks were made a little bit lighter and shorter. The barrels were cut shorter. But really, at its core, it really remained kind of the same rifle that it always was. And before the M91 came around, there was a gun in Russian service called the Berdan. Now, there were some other rifles around, but primarily you had the Berdan service rifle. And if you look at the bolt on an M9130 or any M91 variant, you notice that it looks just like a Russian Berdan black powder rifle bolt. But the only addition is that the M9130 has locking lugs on the front of the bolt, which lock into the front of the receiver to accept a smokeless cartridge that is obviously considerably more powerful than a black powder round that the Berdan rifle fired. So not only did the Russians have a new rifle that fired this nice new smokeless cartridge in 1891, they also needed a way to feed more than one round because the Berdan was a single shot rifle. So a couple of engineers got together and sort of laid down the groundwork for what would become the feeding system, the magazine system, and the locking bolt of the new M91 service rifle. The 9130, let's get back to World War II. So by the time World War II came along, the Russians had already, they had plenty of 91s and carbines, and, they produced the M9130 as a mass-produced infantry rifle that they could hand out to everybody. Now, the Russians also produced a heck of a lot of PPSH machine guns chambered in 7.62 by 25. Those are those funky wooden stock machine guns that you see in all the World War II movies. They have the big 72-round drum on them, and they fire so ridiculously fast they sound like a flock of hornets coming at you through the air. Definitely a terrifying thing to experience on the battlefield. They produced some 8 million PPSHs or something like that. They made a little over, I want to say around 42 million M9130 service rifles. Now, comparing that production to the other belligerents in that war, I think we produced a little over 8 million M1 M1 Garand service rifles, maybe another 6 or 7 million carbines or something like that. So even if you add carbine and rifle production together, It's still not even half of the production of the M9130 service rifle. And I think the Germans made like 11 or 12 million K98s or something like that. I mean, it's definitely a lot. Don't get me wrong. Like, I think between 8 and 10 million or so, like that, off the top of my head. It's somewhere around that ballpark that the Germans built in terms of the K98. And of course, the British also produced a ton of number 4 Mark 1 and Mark 2 service rifles as well, including sniper rifles. Just like we had sniper rifles we were producing, and so did the Germans. And when you're looking at sniper rifle production, the Russians were really the first military to actually mass produce sniper rifles. So they had a version of this gun called the PU. They had two different versions, the PEM and the PU. The PU used a short little 4-power magnification optic that mounted to the side of the rifle, and they would take a standard infantry rifle that shot good from the factory. They would test fire the guns. Oh wow, this one shoots really good. It groups good. Okay, drill it and put a freaking scope on it and make it a sniper rifle. So they were the first people to go, some of these guns are shooting better. We need snipers. We need to demoralize the enemy. So we are going to mass produce snipers. And that is what the Russians did. They were training anyone who could shoot halfway decent to be a sniper. And it was a highly effective tactic for the Russians in World War II, particularly in battlefields like Stalingrad, where not only was it a very target-rich environment, but you had a very demoralized enemy whose supply lines were being stretched so thin. And they were already fighting the terrible Russian winter, and they were just really set up for disaster from day one. Now, the Russians fought really hard for Stalingrad, but one of the reasons that they were able to do so well in Stalingrad was their use of snipers and absolutely demoralizing the enemy by mass producing sniper rifles. Okay, so the 9130 is not just some random infantry rifle. It was an industrial mechanism that they used to bolster their strength in numbers, like to produce 40 some odd million of these freaking things. So it's a very common service rifle. And also after the war, Russia sent these things all over the freaking place. So any communist nation that would support their ideals, they would send these as war aid all over the freaking place. And these guns have found their way onto numerous battlefields all around the world, particularly the M44, the little short version with the bayonet. A lot of those were given to the North Koreans in the Korean War. A lot of those found their way into Vietnam. The M38 and the M44 were used a lot by the Viet Cong as sniper rifles. Many PUs and PEMs found their way into Vietnam to be used against U.S. troops in Vietnam. Even in the war in Iraq, in the years that I was in Iraq, we recovered M9130 PU sniper rifles from weapons caches before. We found, PSLs, Dragunovs, SVDs, and such. So lots of those guns were coming out of communist nations and finding their way onto battlefields all around the world. So the M9130 is an interesting footnote in military history because, I know a lot of people, they say a lot of negative things about the Mosin. They say that they're crude, that they're not really good. They call them garbage rods. They call them whatever they want to call them. And I get that. Yeah, they're not the prettiest guns in the world. Like, the machining is not really fancy. If you look at even the bolt on this particular gun has some really gnarly machining marks. I mean, they weren't making these guns to look cool or to have the best precision in the world. They were making these guns to be functional tools to give to a soldier and have them require the very minimal amount of training on how to use them and keep them running. Like, it's a very simple gun to use. It's a very easy gun to train someone on how to use it with very, very little practice. Somebody can actually learn to shoot this gun quite well. It's lightweight enough to carry for anyone to carry, man or woman, or in some cases children even would occasionally carry these things. And yeah, it was a gun that they could mass produce and provide as an accoutrement of war and a mass scale. And in that function, it actually served its purpose quite well. It turned the tide of the war for them because, again, Stalin looked at people as a resource, right? The military doctrine of the time with the Soviet Union, especially, and even Russia today could even say that the military doctrine was always numerical superiority over the enemy. You don't have to have the best soldiers if you show up with 5 or 6 times as many soldiers as the enemy has. So this was a gun that could be mass produced and given to mass produced people, like given to mass numbers of people, right? And I know this is a cold-hearted thing to say, but in Stalin's mind, it was a low-quality rifle that could be produced relatively cheaply and given to low-quality conscripts. It could be given to somebody that if they died in battle, who cares? We have 40 million of these guns. Hand out another gun and keep on fighting. Like, they didn't mind if they lost the gun. For them, I think they just viewed it as a mass-produced gun that could arm a lot of people. And I think the safety of those soldiers, the effectiveness of those soldiers, the efficacy of those soldiers was a secondary factor to the number of soldiers that they wanted to press the fight onto the battlefield. And it is overwhelming when you're on a battlefield and there are 6 times as many of the enemy as it is you. That is a demoralizing thing. And I think that Stalin realized by having so many dicks on the ground that it was impossible for the enemy to effectively fight an enemy who seemed to be everywhere all the time. And Russia was always about pressing the attack, continuing to attack all the time, day in, day out. Even if they take heavy losses, look at Ukraine. They continuously press the attack. That's always been Russian doctrine. And to press the attack consistently, you need a lot of people. And to have a lot of people, you have to have a way to arm those people cheaply, effectively, and within a mechanism of your industrial capabilities that allows you to mass produce these guns in such numbers that you'll never run out of them. And in that way, they were able to turn this rifle into something that if they made just a few of these, it really wouldn't be much of a thing to talk about. But the fact that when you look at, okay, people can say what they want about the quality of this rifle, they actually are quite accurate, quite capable, and you can totally protect yourself with one of these things. Now, it may not be the best. I mean, I'd rather have an M1 Garand all day long. If I was in World War II, I would much rather have a Sturmgewehr or an MP40 or a Thompson or a Garand or you're really any gun other than this, right? If I was in World War II. But if this is the tool of the trade and it's what you've got, if you're enterprising and savvy enough and, skilled enough, you could, do some work with this thing, especially attach a bayonet, get in close and, do it the old fashioned way, right? And they did. So anyway, I wanted to make this video because I haven't talked about Mosins in a long time. And I wanted to just have an excuse to talk about the M9130. I recently discovered sort of a cache of these in my studio. I'll try to put a picture below. I found a whole crate of these things. I'm like, you know what? I haven't talked about 9130s in forever. Why not do an episode talking about the most mass-produced rifle of World War II? A really interesting example of how a nation's industry can help it win wars. And that is the most important thing to take away. Wars are about outproducing the enemy, not just fighting the enemy, demoralizing the enemy, killing them until they give up, etc. No. Wars, by World War II, we figured out, and the nations of the world figured out, that the country that could outproduce each other the most is the country that's probably going to come out on top. And that has held quite true even till now. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Thanks so much for tuning in. Go check out the link below. Get yourself some Otis cleaning supplies. That'll help me out a lot and help them. And a big thanks to Otis for supporting today's video. I've got many more videos on the way. If you love today's video and you really learned something and maybe enjoyed the little history lesson, drop a super thanks up below. You can click the link and donate $5 or send a coffee my way, whatever you want to do. So if you're feeling generous, you want to throw a few bucks in the hat, you can do so with the super thanks up below. So check it out. Thanks so much for watching today's video. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you soon.